Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one else. The next category, recommendations for habitat and ecosystem improvements. There are 6 of these. Mr. Ray characterizes 3 as inconsistent, 2 is consistent, and 1 is premature. Mr. Ray.
Yeah, I think these again get to issues that we've been discussing all morning. Emphasizing strategies with little or no conflict with the Delta economy as habitat and ecosystem restoration projects proposed. I guess our point of view is that the BDCP is the primary driver of those restoration opportunities right now, and we certainly need to wait and see what their proposals are and understand what impacts they may have on economic sectors before we try to constrain them. So I think our sense was that's an issue that.
I thought a little bit about your characterization after I read the staff memo, and then particularly after yesterday where we started to get into this whole stuff. And I think it's a fair summary that this section in the report, it mostly plays off current information on BDCP. Not so much the Delta plan, much more BDCP and the scope and attention. And just a suggestion to staff. I'm not so sure that at least 2 of the inconsistent actions aren't just simply premature, pending return of BDCP. Let me just explain to you. The tidal marsh discussion, which I've read, I went back and read last night, the open water habitat discussion are really anticipations of something BDCP might do or that might be an alternative to BDCP. They're not wrong per se. But my instinct is what we've done on BDCP is we perform our responsible agency role as best we can, but we are trying not to prejudge it because of our potential appellate role. And so this is just a suggestion, Dan, to you and to Joe. Those 2 struck me as premature. Rather, they might be inconsistent. I have no doubt about that. But until we see what the BDCP's recommendation, damn hard to say.
Well, and here's where my lack of certainty about the nature of things in the Delta comes to play. But my understanding of the biological opinions is that they also require a significant extent of tidal marsh restoration. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not sure that it's solely a matter of BDCP. I think the BDCP is the way those water agencies intend to comply with the draft BOs. But my understanding is that there's some obligations already for extensive areas of tidal marsh restoration.
I went back and forth exactly as you did, Mr. Chair, about whether is it premature. I know that the BOs require, I think it's about 7,000, 8,000 acres of tidal marsh restoration in the next few years. And so that's underway, and it's a requirement of law. So I expect that will happen. And I wasn't sure if in your plan you were saying we should scale those back where it says tidal marsh plan should be significantly reduced. Are you talking about BDCP? If it's BDCP, I agree it's premature. If it's the others, then I think it's inconsistent.
I guess I'm agnostic on whether it's premature or potentially consistent or potentially inconsistent. The fact is, until we know the target we're aiming at, it's hard to. And BDCP is a unique situation given our status and its complicated and huge nature. It's hard. So I think about that issue as you guys come back.
And even on the 6th one where we say inconsistent, I think it's a matter of I think staff would agree, we should focus on lands that are owned by state-owned lands or federally owned lands and work with willing sellers. But I think as staff, we're not willing to say only, and we want to make sure that the highest priority restoration projects don't get stopped because we put an arbitrary requirement in. And so I think conceptually we agree with the direction, but it's how it's worded, and how it's worded's important. And I'm sure you guys thought about how it was worded too. So that's, at least from my perspective.
Well, it is the BDCP proposal on tidal marsh.
Oh, so that's what you're worried about, the 65,000 acres.
So that would be I don't think this recommendation would say that you can't.
Can't do the 7,000 that are
No.
currently planned.
When we get into the water reliability, there's a similar conversation to be had, reference to BDCP there. I'd like to figure out a way that we treat, this is a new title, the reserved issues in a way that's consistent so we can examine their ideas even if whenever we have the information to play off against, rather than making a determination that there are no circumstances under which now if there's something else in the draft Delta plan, the fifth draft, that you believe raises an inconsistency, I'd want to hear that. But if it's all related to BDCP, just think about how to deal with it. That's all. I'm sorry, Mike.
No, the only thing I would like to respond to is one. I think the text that was in the ESP talks about habitat-friendly agriculture to be promoted. I think there's a lack of emphasis on the promotion of habitat-friendly agriculture. There is a lot of things going on within the Delta for habitat-friendly agriculture. There is incentives that could be provided for the conversion to habitat-friendly agriculture that is economically sustainable as an operation, but oftentimes needs the support to shift the capital investments around. And this was something that when I was in the legislature, I discussed with Mary Nichols when she was part of the Natural Resources Agency almost 20 years ago, about doing that. And I think you have state agencies that have engaged in demonstration projects, but they have overlooked the commercial application of habitat-friendly agriculture that's being taken on the behalf of individual initiatives. That needs to be interwoven with the other goals, the overall goals relating to habitat development.
And certainly on the wildlife-friendly agriculture, I mean, we've got great examples in the Delta and in the Yola Bypass. It's Fish and Game, with the funds they've had available to them, has had a program they've done outreach for property owners for a while. I think they would feel they're doing the best they can. California has not made full use of Farm Bill programs. For example, the Wildlife Habitat Enhancement Program that's in the current Farm Bill, because it's focused its priorities on other Farm Bill conservation programs and sort of let some of those dollars move to other states. It's not always been a priority for the state technical committee that works on Farm Bill issues. And certainly there's more we could do that way. But we have to remember that all the habitat needs of the Delta can't be met with wildlife-friendly agriculture. Certainly fisheries issues, other endangered species, salt marsh harvest mice, and some tidal-dependent plants, riparian areas that support so many of the songbirds that migrate up and down the valley. Those aren't needs that can be met with solely with wildlife-friendly agriculture. So if we're going to meet those goals, there's going to have to be some other kinds of restoration.
Maybe I'm wrong. I didn't read the economic sustainability of plans saying that habitat could only be achieved through. Now, you would prefer a more respectful emphasis on environmental friendly agriculture, but you did not exclude other options.
It has to be woven in to the overall.
Right.
Overall, I think there has not been enough focus or talk about the value of going in that direction. And if I'd like to comment on the open water habitat. That's not so much directed at BDCP as it has been to a series of studies that's come out of other entities, PPIC, University of California, Davis, that talks about the open water habitat. I think we, through the discoveries that we've done with the ESP, find that there are other alternatives to that make sense, and that there's a certain amount of negative externalities associated with expanded open water habitat that it doesn't necessarily meet the needs of the statute with respect to preserved and enhanced, and then also may not necessarily be consistent with the co-equal goals. And I would take issue as to avoidable outcome of prioritizing levying improvements. As we discussed, that's a much broader discussion in terms of where the decision goes for terms of policy on levies and how that would impact the issue to flood permanently or not flood permanently islands in the Delta.
Okay.
If I could, that relates to, at least in part, the 6 islands in the South Delta, right? That discussion in some of those plans where they were going to say,
Yeah. I mean, this is connected directly to what we were discussing yesterday, and our feeling that that open water habitat, that's not a BDCP proposal at all. They're focused on other areas. That's a potential implication of a levy investment strategy that would come from the Delta plan. And anyway, we have raised some economic concerns with that proposal that have not always been raised in other considerations of Delta levy investment, particularly with respect to wanting to encourage the recreational values. There's serious concerns about the recreational impacts of that kind of configuration of the Delta, particularly if our strategy recognizes that we need to try to enhance and protect the existing marina facilities and the facilities that are out there today because of we're not seeing a lot of new investment and the difficulty of encouraging new investment, and so.
What was that number again? You said 60%, or of the marinas and their activity was within that?
It depends on how you define impacted, like all things.
Right.
But the previous boating study showed that area is the most popular area for boating, and there's a very high concentration of the marinas that directly surround it. It would be seriously impacted by that, and also discussing issues with the shipping channel and other issues that are in play there.
I think from our point of view, certainly that's one of the key issues that needs to be examined as we think about prioritizing levy investments. Because it is possible, I can imagine that if the sufficient funds aren't available to upgrade every levy to the desired goals, then there's going to maybe failure some places. And I think when we look at the impacts of that, we need to do it objectively. I've listened to Mr. Dangerman's description of the recreational impacts, for example, of open water, but I know, for example, Frank's Tract, large area of open water operated by state parks as a recreation area. It's one of the bass factories of the Delta, and there's also a really active hunting program out there. And there's a whole string of marinas along the north side of Bethel Island facing Frank's Tract.
Didn't you guys tell us in the earlier draft of the Economic Sustainability Plan to restore Frank's Tract? I don't remember that, but somebody did. One of the locals did.
So I think that needs to be examined, and as well as the impact on the navigation channels. We understand that, but there's certainly many successful federally maintained navigation channels that traverse open water as well as go past levied islands, and so I think that's a conversation to have with the Corps. One of the outstanding issues.
And Mr. Ray, you're going to go talk to the Discovery Bay Boating Association, who will be here in approximately 13 minutes in a flotilla to point to the error of some of your comments.
That may be, yes. But I think that's we need to have some, open-eyed discussion of what the implications of that would be.
Okay.